All right, guys, back here with another episode of minor league news and brews, and everybody knows what time it is here. It's draft time. The Pirates drafting towards the top, at the top for the second time, but towards the top for, it's been a while. Go back to 2019 when we selected Quinn Priester was the last time we were outside of the top 10. Bringing back a man who was on the regular feed over there at Bucs in the Basement for at least the past 2, maybe the past 3 years, seeing his face first time in person. Joe Doyle at Joe Doyle MILB. He's over there at it's a new place. I had to get it right. It's Future Star Series at FSS_plus. He's also got the Overslot MLB Draft podcast. Joe, how you doing today, brother?
I am good, man. I didn't realize how busy and how many things I have going on until you listed them off.
Yeah, you're like, okay, I got to record that podcast later. I got to write this article later. College World Series, as we're recording today, wrapping up last night. 3 kind of like crazy, but just awesome games. I mean, for anybody that doesn't watch college baseball, very cool games. And especially with, 3 of usually a lot of people's top 3 or sometimes 4 or 5 players in the spotlight for that. I'm going to delay what everybody knows we're going to talk about here just for a second and just kind of talk about having the 1-1 for the second time in a few years here. And some people are like, you know what? Especially in a draft class like this year, if you're not picking 1-1, you could possibly have some players, kind of drop to you. But I mean, everybody would say, you want to be 1-1, but sometimes it feels like, do you want to be? Because it feels like there's like more judgment there. I don't know what it would be, but so do you want to pick 1-1, Joe?
I mean, the amount of money that the first overall pick affords you is a huge bonus. The Pirates have more money than anybody by a wide margin. And I'd say this, like the difference between picking 1-1 or I know the lottery system kind of muddles it up a little bit, but the difference between picking 1 and let's say 8, if you're picking 8, you lost 90 games last year. That's a miserable, experience to sit through too. So you might as well get the first pick, get your choice on what player you think you can best efficiently develop and go from there.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I go. I know that a lot of times the pressure comes, and I mean, you put out some stuff there that I saw retweeted, and then I, kind of followed along with a little bit, which is it's always been, at least in Pirates fans' minds, it's been Cruz, it's been Skeens. We've heard Langford mentioned a little bit, but there were some whispers that you tweeted out concerning maybe the Pirates, going for Skeens at a little bit of an underslot, and then Cruz falling to the Nationals because the Nationals were possibly looking, to pay that overslot, and then even more. I mean, as it happens with the draft, stuff comes out, and it's like, well, Skeens doesn't want to sign with the Pirates. I kind of, if you could break down, like, how this goes with like the top prospects, like they're having discussions prior to and leading up to the draft, correct?
Yeah, I would say they're probably not having discussions in terms of like Scott Boras or Paul Skeens' agent with teams yet. I think those will probably ramp up July 2nd, July 3rd as we go into the holiday weekend. But listen, if you're Dylan Cruz, if you're Paul Skeens, uh, there is probably not a worse year to be the talent that you are. You look back at like 2020, right? So Spencer Torkelson goes first overall. The gap between Spencer Torkelson and the next best player in that class was huge. So the Tigers really didn't have much of a choice than to pay the freight, that full slot for Torkelson. And you go the year before that, 2019 Adley Rutschman, so much better than the next best player on that board. The Orioles had no choice but to pay the freight full slot. You look at this 2023 class, and the Pirates can kind of leverage Skeens, Langford, Cruz all against each other and say, listen, we're not paying whoever we draft full slot value. We're going to save some money. And if you don't like that, we'll take the other guy that's willing to take a little bit less money, because the margin between those three players is small enough to where saving that bit of money and spending extra on those future picks is just, in my opinion, and I think the Pirates would agree, it's just too valuable than to pay Dylan Cruz $9.8 million or whatever that would end up being.
Yeah, because I mean, the way that you broke it down is that, Skeens would take a little bit under the slot value, saving the Pirates. I think it was somewhere around like $700,000. The Nationals would pay up, and he wouldn't get probably what he's looking for, or what the overpay, or what the full slot would be from the Pirates. But it's maybe more than the Pirates. I don't know if they're willing to offer, or if this is just all kind of like negotiating, ploys at this point in time.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, and I want to stress that it's not like a collusion type of a deal where the two teams are pining against each other. But if you are the Pirates and you're afforded the chance to get a Paul Skeens for 9.1 million, for example, save 600,000, and then all of the sudden you can spend, you know, 2.6 million or 2.5 million on your second pick and get one of the top high school players in the class, that might make more sense than paying Dylan Cruz 9.8 million and landing a very solid high school player. But, in order to build a 26-man roster, you need more than one guy. I mean, look what the Pirates have done with Brian Reynolds. Brian Reynolds has been a stud for several years. It doesn't get you over the hump by himself. So you need quantity, you need quality in quantity. And I think this year with the talent that should go deep into the second round, it's just a good opportunity to kind of spread that wealth a little bit.
Yeah, and we've seen, I mean, I'm going back to Spencer Torkelson, not, getting off to the hottest start, in his career. But then this year, I mean, like you said, we've said it a million times. There's Cruz, there's Skeens, there's Langford, there's, you're hearing Max Clark's name, mentioned as possibly maybe being the highest ceiling or top hitter, in this class overall. I mean, it's not saying that's going to happen, but, certain scouts see them different ways. Do you see a scenario where it's not Skeens or it's not Cruz for the Pirates? Like, is there other, possibilities out there? And would it be Langford next? Because people are kind of like, well, if Cruz doesn't want to come here, we want the hitter. So we would be okay with Langford.
Yeah, I think it depends on what each one of these players is willing to afford the Pirates, right? If Max Clark comes out and he says, "I will take $7.3 million, I will save you $2.4 million with that first pick," and the Pirates truly do believe that Max Clark could end up being one of the top two or three players in this class, you bucket 2.3, $2.4 million for later in the draft, and all of a sudden you could walk away from this draft with 4 first round type talents. That is an enormous coup. So I think, we've brought up over time what it would look like with Skeens. Skeens is probably not falling farther than 2 or 3. So he might save you 600 grand max. And we've talked about, the ego that is Max Clark. He might save you 2.4 million. He might go all the way down to the limit, 2.4. Langford is the real question mark. And because Florida has been playing baseball and he's a rather quiet guy, we haven't heard much from Langford, and we haven't heard much from Wyatt Langford's camp. If the possibility exists, and I haven't heard this yet, but I'm sure this narrative will kick up steam over the next 5 or 6 days. If the possibility exists that you can take Wyatt Langford and pay him 8.5 million and save 1.2, 1.3 million and spread that out with your second and third and fourth pick, I think you're going to see a lot of momentum here over the last 2 weeks with a potential Wyatt Langford to Pittsburgh type of a situation. But it all depends. Listen, the draft is, especially the top of the draft, you've kind of alluded to this. It's not really a talent exercise. It's a money game. It always has been. And when there's 4 or 5 players at the top that all have, at least close to the same amounts of talent and projection, they have to bounce off of each other. And so if Wyatt Langford comes in and he says, "I'll take 8.5 mil," I think there's a real chance that he could go number one. But we'll see what Pittsburgh thinks.
Yeah, because just from the stuff that I've read, and it's obviously not as simple as this. So, I mean, I don't want people to think that it's like, oh, this is what's separating them. But I mean, a lot of people that I've listened to, a lot of people that I've read and talked to is, the razor's edge between, a Dylan Cruz and a Wyatt Langford is that, Cruz is projectable and could stay at center field, where Wyatt Langford is seen more as a corner outfielder. So, I mean, and they all have their positive attributes. I mean, we've all got to see them on full display this year. I mean, as soon as Wyatt Langford hit the home run last night, everybody's just like, well, I'd be okay with Wyatt Langford. He's an extremely talented player. But like you said, it basically comes down to, a money game. It comes down to, especially in years like this where, at least I'd say four of the top five guys. I mean, there's always, that outside perspective, but there's, those top guys that they haven't separated themselves as much, or they've brought themselves a lot closer together instead of, guys falling off throughout the year. So it makes it extremely tough for the Pirates. But one thing that you mentioned earlier was saving that money for later on. And the Pirates have done, especially Ben Cherington era, have done very well with that. And one thing they've been really successful at getting is high school arms. And Anthony Solomito, Jared Jones. And Jared Jones at his age is already in AAA. Anthony Solomito, hopefully he can keep up what he's doing in Altoona, but has just been absolutely, amazing. Are there any, like high school arms this year that you're seeing as possibly? I mean, the Pirates, unfortunately, this year don't have the comp round A, but because of their record, they're pretty close to the top of the second round. Is there anybody that you kind of have had your eye on as far as like high school arms, moving forward in this draft?
Yeah, there's a few. This is a pretty interesting year for high school arms. And if Pittsburgh does go the route of saving the amount of money that they could save with that first pick, they could pull any high school arm they want down to their second pick. They could pull any high school arm they want down to their third pick. They couldn't stop teams from, I mean, they could effectively stop teams from drafting that player with the amount of money they could commit. Look at what the Texas Rangers did last year when they drafted Rucker. What did they draft him? Third?
Yes.
They had so much money saved up from that pick that Brock Porter fell all the way to the fourth round. And I had Brock Porter a top 20 talent in the class. There was so much money committed to Brock Porter pre-draft that no other team even stepped in and said, oh, we're going to try and draft him anyways and see if he'll sign. When the money is that wide, you can control the draft. And that's a huge bonus. In terms of high school arms in this class, the guy that immediately sticks out is Thomas White. He's a left-hander, 6'6", 200 pounds, out of Florida. Out of Raleigh, Massachusetts. He's a Northeastern kid. But he's a lefty that throws 96. He's got one of the better changeups in the class. Had comparisons to David Price. Just one of the more complete left-handed pitchers that has been available in any class in quite some time. There's some command issues with the fastball, but there was with Solometo too. So that's certainly a name that has been rumored to need big money to pull him away from Vanderbilt, and I think that's a guy that you need to watch for. But honestly, there's a lot of other arms in that 30 to 60 range that are going to require big money. The one that sticks out for me is Blake Walters. He's a righty. He's 6'5" out of Illinois. He's committed to play ball at Arizona. Fastball's been up to 99, upper 80s slider. I think there's a ton of teams, and I mean a ton of teams, that are in on Blake Walters in that 20 to 35 range. But the Pirates could effectively poach him off of the board if they were to save money with that first pick and say, hey, we're going to float you down to our second pick. We're going to float you down to our third pick. We're going to get you $2.2 million, but just, don't entertain any other offers. Couple others to keep in mind. I think Alex Clemmy is a kid that you have to keep an eye on. He's a 6'6" lefty out of Middleton, Rhode Island. He throws 99. And that, you can't find lefties with that much athleticism and that much arm speed in any given draft. It's very rare. And then the last one that I would throw out, Josh Noth. He's a 6'2" righty out of Medford, New York, committed to Ole Miss. He throws a 3,000 RPM breaking ball. He's had Lance McCullers comparisons. A lot of good high school pitching can be had if you move the money the right way. And I'll say this last part. How much different does the Pirates, we'll call it a rebuild for the sake of the conversation, how much different does this rebuild look right now for Pittsburgh? Should they not have Jared Jones? Should they not have Anthony Solometo? Should they not have all of these players that are beginning to crest at the right time? I think it's a much different picture if the prospects aren't coming up like they are right now for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and if you've gone, I mean, if you went, I don't know, I don't know if it would be an overslot or an underslot or whatever it would be with the first couple picks and not saving that money. Ben Cherington has kind of gone, and he's shown that he will adjust money to, pull, what was it, Braylon Bishop away from Arkansas. Obviously, he's still developing, still young, and still far down in the system, but taking that chance on a player who has some projectability and does, I mean, with every prospect, have some risk, but by saying, we're going to take him and five other guys that we kind of pay over slot, as opposed to we're just going to throw all of our money into this one guy. It's I think it's people that are watching the baseball draft, and I've been watching it for years, but it's still that people are thinking, oh, okay, we're going to take this guy because he's like the quarterback of this draft or whatever. And it's like, man, this is not the NFL. This is not the same.
Exactly.
I mean, even with, a Dylan Cruz, like even if you get him, like you said, to develop and he becomes, everything that everybody thinks he's going to be. I mean, how many years have we seen the Angels struggle with, and I know it's a simple example, but with like Mike Trout, he was the
Mhm.
best player in Major League Baseball for like 5-6 years straight and wasn't even in the playoffs. So I mean, it's not as simple as just taking that. And like you said, up towards the top, it kind of turns itself into a money game. But I mean, I want to take a look back, as we're sitting here, we're talking about Ben Cherington's, previous drafts and how well he's done. And people, I mean, right now we're looking at Nick Gonzalez brought up to the majors, Henry Davis brought up to the majors. Um, and I'm not going to make you, I mean, maybe I will, maybe I'll make you put a grade on, Ben Cherington's drafts over the years. But I mean, every single year after Ben Cherington drafts, it's like, well, he did this really well. He did this really well. He did this really well. And then, prior to the next draft, everybody takes time and like rips on, the state of the system right now. And most of that may be due to how the major league team is performing at this point in time. But I really, in my heart of hearts, cannot see Ben Cherington doing a much better job over his first, 3 drafts as a GM.
Yeah, I'm with you. And you're going to have, especially when you take the quantity approach, you're going to have the misses. The Lonnie Whites are going to happen. And he's still young. I mean, he's 20 years old. I know that he's kind of struggling a little bit. That's going to happen. But when you leave the last 2 drafts, maybe it's the last 3 with Jared Jones, Anthony Solometo, Bubba Chandler, Henry Davis. I mean, you are stocking the cupboard for when this thing really hits. And keep in mind, farm systems aren't built exclusively to feed the big league club. They're also built to trade resources for when the team is ready to really rock and roll. And I think that's what you're seeing with, I know the Padres have struggled a little bit, but that's what you're seeing with the Padres. They unloaded the farm to make a real push for the World Series. And, that's what Seattle has done a little bit. So I think Charrington has done a very, very good job. You look back at some of those other drafts with what the Tigers walked away with in 2020 after drafting Torkelson and not going under slot with that first pick. Torkelson struggled, and because of that, they didn't have a lot that's worked out after that. So I think if you take the quantity approach and you are well thought out in terms of player development and guys that you can actually maximize, you're going to do well. In terms of how I think Ben Cherington has done, I'd give him a solid B plus, A minus. He's done the most with the resources that he's been provided, and I think Pittsburgh is beginning to win, and they've got reinforcements on the way. So I don't know what more you could ask for.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that, everybody just kind of wants everything to turn around, quicker and sooner rather than later. I mean, especially when you see a team like Cincinnati taking off the way they are right now. We're in under the impression or given the impression by some that, that maybe they were a little bit behind us. But I mean, I don't know how a team could be behind when, they have the pitching prospects that they had and how young they are and what they've been coming up with. And I'm kind of hoping that's the same for the Pirates with, I know Quinn Priester was under Huntington, but that was 2019. Jared Jones in 2020. I mean, Anthony Solomito. I mean, it's just been, and we're seeing, Thomas Harrington from last year. Michael Kennedy is also, so extremely young. Owen Kellington. I mean, just a number of like pitching prospects that they've come up with. And obviously not all of them are going to work out, but I mean, I'd rather have 5 or 6 guys with that type of talent as opposed to, throwing it all in on one guy. And like you said before, it may be not the best year for Paul Skeens, because if Paul Skeens wasn't dealing with a Langford, a Cruz, a Max Clark, then he may be the guy that's looking to get, that full slot. Because that's the last thing I want to ask you, Joe, is just on talent base here. Like, how much, and I know they're completely different, they're different players, because one's an outfielder, one's a pitcher, and then you could even throw Langford in there, another outfielder. Like, how far apart is the talent level with these players? Because it doesn't seem like it's very far apart.
Well, Skeens is Skeens is in a man, that guy is in a galaxy of his own in terms of college pitching prospects. People are quick to say, "Oh, he's the best pitching prospect since Steven Strasburg or Garrett Cole." First off, on the Strasburg one, he pitched at San Diego State. Nothing against San Diego State, but he was a kind of a chubbier prospect that was chucking 97 with a big breaking ball. Skeens is better than what Steven Strasburg was back then. And even if you subscribe to the fact that, you call him the next Steven Strasburg helped lead the Nationals to a half decade of dominance in their division. And I don't know why you wouldn't sign up for that. In terms of Dylan Cruz and Wyatt Langford, I do think it's very close. I think Dylan Cruz could be an average, maybe a solid average center fielder. Maybe just a tick better than Brian Reynolds, if I'm being totally honest with you. I don't think he's an established center fielder, but he probably plays up the middle until he's about 26, where he's supplanted by someone that's a little bit more athletic. With Wyatt Langford, I think he's definitely a corner guy. He doesn't have the arm for center field. He's not quite as fleet of foot as Dylan Cruz, but more raw power than Dylan Cruz. Not the same hit tool that Dylan Cruz has. But I will say this, in watching Wyatt Langford, I think his swing is more catered to the pro game than Dylan Cruz swing might be. And what I mean by that is Dylan Cruz has such a fantastic eye and approach at the plate that when he swings at anything in the zone, he makes contact. I mean, Dylan Cruz just makes contact with anything that's in the zone. But when he does expand the zone, he struggles to make contact. It's a little bit of a grooved swing. I think Langford has a little bit more malleability as it pertains to like fighting off bad pitches that he does chase. So I think it's kind of a wash at the end of the day. Like, ultimately, I see Wyatt Langford being a guy that probably hits north of 30 home runs at the next level, probably doesn't have the batting average as Dylan Cruz, but I see Dylan Cruz as a guy that really hits, a 275, 280 guy that, might have a season or two with 30 home runs, but probably is a guy that more settles in that 24 to 27 home run bucket year in and year out. So they're both perennial all-star type talents. And frankly, I think either one of them landing in Pittsburgh, you should be absolutely stoked.
Yeah. So, I mean, in my eyes, I mean, this draft, if you're gonna be 1-1, this is a good year to have this problem, because, like you said, the separation is so small. This whole time I've gone back and forth and back, and I mean, I'm not going to make my prediction as to who I think they're going to pick yet. I'm not going to ask you to do that, but I mean, we've broken this down, I think, the best we can, Joe. Like I said, this is second or third year. We've talked first year on video. Definitely appreciate your time, every single time. It's always a great conversation. For those of you that don't, please go follow Joe at Joe Doyle, MILB. Listen to the Overslot podcast. Read all of his stuff over at FSS_plus. Joe, thanks for coming on, dude, and looking forward to doing this in future years, brother.
Absolutely, man. Always a pleasure. I appreciate you having me back. And let's say it. Let's go Buccos.
Go Bucs. All right, guys, we've let Joe go, and Joe is going to be a busy man, so he's got to get prepared for the next podcast he's on. But what you have to get prepared for is to listen to me talk about the beers I had on vacation. My wife and my sister lit it up for me. It's Father's Day, it's my birthday, and so we drank pretty much about every beer you could think under the sun. It started out with the Sweetwater Highlight, one of those low-cal, easy IPAs coming in at 4% on the weighted based on batting average scale. I'm giving that one a 450. Bring that down to 400. The next one is one that we've had a bunch of times, but my wife knows how much I like it. It's the Brooklyn Summer Ale. That's a pale ale coming in at 5%. Give that a 425, knock it down to about a 375. We also went with another one of our favorites. It's the Victory Summer Love. It's a golden ale. Can drink that one while you're floating down the river, which we did for about 2.5 hours because the river was so low and it wasn't really moving. So had some Victory Summer Love. That one's coming in about a 450. Knocked that down to a 400. And then she went out there, and Harpoon is a brewery. I believe it's in Massachusetts that I've liked a lot. And it's just been, one that I've had different really good beers from, but this is ones that I hadn't had any of these. And the first one was the Harpoon Summer Style. That's a Keller Kolsch. And that one's about a 5%. That's a 400. Knock that down to a 350. Another one of these low-cal, easy drinking IPAs. It's called Rec League, coming in at 4%. And all these low-cal ones are usually on the hazy side. Give that a 450. Knock that down to 400. This one, I've always told you guys, if it's a higher alcohol content, it usually is one I'm not going to have as many of. It's the Juicer. It's the Juicier Hazy IPA. 7.2%. I gave that one a 375, knocked that down to about a 325. Like I said, it tasted good, but I mean, I'm thinking in my old age, I'm starting to like the lighter beers. I can't drink as many of the double IPAs. I've never been a stout guy. So, I mean, I don't know what it is. The other one is the Southie Lager, coming in at 5%. That's about a 400 down to a 350. And that's one that comes in like one of their summer packs. I looked online as to see where they would be at. They have like 2 or 3 different varieties of the summer pack from Harpoon, but I don't think you can really go, too bad with any of those. And I mean, just very enjoyable beers. So we'll have to see what I'm going to do next week here. Might have to go back out to Creekside Beer over there, get some beers from there, maybe go to a local brewery, try to get a 4-pack or something as we move, into the second half of the minor league baseball season. We'll be talking about some of the promotions, trying to also, had a cancellation to talk about, the Greensboro Grasshoppers Park as compared to the other parks. Might try to do something else with that. But until then, I want to thank Joe Doyle for coming back on this show for the first time, but on Bucs in the Basement for at least the third or fourth time here. Always providing great information. Looking forward to the draft. But until next time, everybody, let's go Indians. Let's go Curve. Let's go Hoppers. Let's go Marauders. Let's go FCL and DSL Pirates. And we'll talk to you guys next time.